Wait for the camera, George.
No, thank you, if it's all the same.
Usual, Mr. Jago?
Oh, I think we can do better than that, don't you, Miss Higson?
Difficult to imagine an international spy ring operating out of here. Miss Leela, what a pleasant surprise.
It is good to be back.
I heard on the grapevine that Queen Victoria isn't my biggest fan. Heaven knows why.
We are no expert in your line of work.
As entertaining as this is, we seem to be wandering somewhat aimlessly.
Say we've been through some scrapes, eh?
Right. What a cruise I shall ever forget. How can I help then?
There is, and never shall be. Only one Jago and Litefoot.
After you, Henry. I'm sure it'll be delightful.
Welcome back to another Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama review. Today we'll be taking a look at a very special release that is of course Jago and Litefoot Forever, the final ever full cast audio drama story as a part of the Jago and Litefoot Big Finish series. It is of course in tribute to Trevor Baxter, who does of course play Professor George Litefoot, who we unfortunately lost around this time last year. Now this is a very big episode for me. I've been waiting for it for quite a long time because of course we did lose Trevor Baxter last year, and I honestly thought that the series was that's it over, but it is really nice to see the Big Finish are doing a final ever story to sort of cap off the series, and this is a beautiful mix of a tribute to Trevor Baxter but also a tribute to the Jago and Litefoot series, but also at the same time it's not just a sad story but it is a celebration to the whole series and Trevor as a whole. So yeah, I'm very happy that this episode has been released, and to be honest, even though I've started this review by saying it is a Big Finish video that is a review of this episode, it's not going to be a review because it feels wrong reviewing a story that is essentially a tribute piece to an absolutely intelligent, wonderful actor. So yeah, this is going to be one of those reviews that is a little bit more laid back, and I'm just going to be taking a look at this episode for what it is and not really getting very critical onto it, as I don't normally do with Jago and Litefoot anyway because it is of a pretty high standard. But yeah, it just feels wrong going into this episode saying, well, this could be changed, this could be changed, because it's not an episode like that. It is essentially a celebration of somebody's life. And yeah, this episode review is probably going to be one of the most difficult of this channel ever because, as you all probably know, Jago and Litefoot is my favourite Big Finish series. I think at times I even question if it's my favourite thing entirely, even over Doctor Who, because I do absolutely adore it. And ever since I first got into it and when listening to the Sixth Doctor story Stage Fright in the Last Adventure box set, I just instantly loved and adored Jago and Litefoot. And yeah, ever since then I've gone on to get many box sets, and I'm nearly towards the end of my collection. But I guess the beautiful thing about Jago and Litefoot is the adventures continue forever, which is very much the main message behind this release, which is very emotional yet happy at the same time. First off, and as always, in the description below I will be leaving the link to go and buy this release from the Big Finish website. It is of course currently out now, and to be honest, if you're a Big Finish fan and if you're a Jago and Litefoot fan, you no doubt have this release already. To be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if you had this on pre-order, but this is a rather special format release, unlike the other Jago and Litefoot stories where it is a part of your 4-part box set adventure. Due to this being a special story, this is in fact one-hour adventure called Jago and Litefoot Forever, written by Paul Morris, and we also have Jago and Litefoot The Revival attached on there as well, which was the 2-part short trip that was released last year as a part of the anniversary, which I have separately reviewed. So if you would like to see my thoughts on that episode, then check out that video because I went into that episode completely in that one, and I won't be doing that in this video. But this is a physical CD priced at $16.99, and it is at the download of $14.99, and it is directed by Lisa Balm. I do believe that it is sort of your standard sort of 2-part jewel case kind of thing. I think it's maybe 3 discs long. You also have your behind the scenes documentary on there as well, so it is a really nice box set. And as I say, if you're a Jago and Litefoot fan, then I'm assuming that you've got this release already. I don't even need to persuade you because it is pretty much your must buy for Jago and Litefoot. But I definitely recommend getting this one as well if you're interested into Jago and Litefoot, but also the previous box sets as well, and actually getting into this series because it is such a wonderful adventure. As for this story, some familiar faces are returning. We do of course have Christopher Benjamin as Henry Gordon Jago, Trevor Baxter as Professor George Litefoot, Lisa Barman as Ellie Higson, Conrad Asquith as Inspector Quick, Louise Jameson as Leela, Colin Baker as the Sixth Doctor, Rowena Cooper as Queen Victoria, David Warner as Dr. Luke Betterman, Jamie Newall as Aubrey, as Stephen Critchlow as Sir Humphrey Eagleton, and then we also have a few other people playing other parts in the cast as well. So yeah, we do have a few familiar faces returning. Also my favourite Doctor, which if this episode wasn't a hard enough story as it is to listen to, having a few lines thrown in there by Colin as well. Of course, Jago and Litefoot's actual Doctor, even though they debuted with the 4th Doctor Doctor. I like to associate Colin's Doctor with them a little bit more because he's had a few moments throughout this series with them, and it's also really nice to see Leela returning in there as well. But yeah, this episode is one like no other because it is essentially not bringing Lightfoot back from the dead, but it is using sort of past clips that have been used in previous series, and then also reconstructing certain scenes to make it look like Trevor Baxter is still within the story, and it is done incredibly well. I honestly thought that this episode would be a little bit jarring in parts, but it does really feel like he's there, and that is the wonderful thing about audio drama. The way that they've managed to actually create this story is really talented, and to be honest, I could imagine this piece being an award-winning one for when it comes to Big Finish, because it is just so good the way they've made it, and the story itself gets so much done within 1 hour. It is a tribute to Trevor, a tribute to Jago Litefoot. It summarises the series, summarises the characters, but also at the same time has a wonderful, strong story to tell with an absolutely brilliant narrative. Firstly, for characters, I'm going to be going into Henry Gordon Jago, of course played by Christopher Benjamin, because this is a very strong story for him, because I do believe this is the first ever Jago Litefoot story where he is taking this on alone. It's very unusual probably for Christopher Benjamin to be recording this episode without Trevor. The atmosphere in the recording studio must have been very different, but also at the same time rather emotional. I think that he honestly has a lot to credit for this release. There are some absolutely wonderful moments with Christopher Benjamin throughout this story, especially towards the very end where we have a moment that sort of is the breaking point of the story, where we have the final episode sort of being revealed and the main plot actually sort of unravelling itself. A wonderful moment where Jago is going up in this hot air balloon, and yeah, he's basically saying, "I'm coming to get you, Lightfoot," and it is just an emotional piece, but also it kind of breaks the fourth wall at the same time, because you know that it is in reference to the character, but also at the same time you know that it's in reference to sort of Trevor himself, and sort of that breaking the fourth wall and actually saying how strong their relationship was out of the drama, but also within the drama at the same time. So I do think that Christopher Benjamin had an absolutely brilliant role to play throughout this story. The whole idea of him sort of losing parts of his memory as well, it was sort of rather difficult to listen to, admittedly, because you have this character that you've grown to adore through these previous series, and you kind of have a little bit of his character slipping away almost. It feels completely like a Jago that we have in other stories, but that at the same time is very effective. And the final scene for this series, where you have them sort of both reuniting, is such a wonderful moment, and honestly it did, I think it would be fair to say, and fair to be assumed, I cried at this release. It's probably the first ever Big Finish story that I fully cried at. I did have a few tears when it came to the Sixth Doctor's last adventure with Colin, but this episode I was full on bawling, but it was also tears of emotion, but at the same time sort of joy, because I think that this is, as I said, the wonderful balance between actually celebrating but also at the same time mourning somebody who's no longer with us. The thing about Trevor Baxter as well now, which is rather unusual because he's not in this story but he is at the same time. Basically Big Finish have very cleverly used clips from previous series and certain standout moments to kind of show Jago retelling certain aspects of the series, and I have picked some really nice moments, some of which that I've not yet encountered within the adventures that I've listened to, so I'm very much looking forward to see those more in the future, but also some really standout moments from series that I have picked up on in reviews, such as the very end of Series 1, Episode 1, The Bloodless Soldier, where you have Death on the Platform, and that absolutely brilliant standout scene where you have them confronting this problem, and from that moment you know that Jago and Lightfoot has got this bond. So that was a really nice moment that has been selected, and also a scene I absolutely adore as well from Jago and Lightfoot The Revival, where Lightfoot actually describes the 10th Doctor, and it is an absolutely wonderful piece of dialogue where he says he is somebody that could teach us sort of how to be the very best person in ourselves, and I think that I can actually remember quoting that within the review, so really happy to see that incorporated into this story as well. And also the way that they've actually brought Trevor back for the sort of opening and closing aspects of this episode, the way that we have them actually interacting with each other, it was a really lovely piece. And of course at the very end of this story we do have Jago and Lightfoot coming together once again, and the way that they've actually edited together certain bits of dialogue to actually bring Jago and Lightfoot sort of back for the last time, it was a lovely piece. And yeah, I can't really comment on Lightfoot for this story, which is odd because he isn't really in it, but he is at the same time. I think the Big Finish have got that wonderful balance in there, but yeah, it's a very strong story to actually represent both of their characters. And I think the relationship between them, this episode isn't necessarily a complete 100% tribute to Trevor, but it's also a tribute to the Jago and Lightfoot relationship and the bond that they have, and that is something that is explored very much throughout this story, and the way that Jago needs to try and save Lightfoot, which is something that is also referenced within the trailer as well. And of course going into Ellie Higson and Inspector Quick, of course played by Lisa Bauman and Conrad Asquith once again, and as for every other series with Jago and Lightfoot. They contribute an absolutely wonderful atmosphere to this series. I think that if this was any other Big Finish spin-off, it wouldn't quite feel the same. I think that the family unit that they have and this relationship between everybody in the reoccurring cast is just so beautiful, and they really nicely carry this story. There is a few moments where Ellie and Inspector Quick go off together just to sort of investigate to help Jago, because there is the absence of Lightfoot throughout the story. And yeah, you can tell that they're sort of taking his place in a nice way, and I do really like the way they go and have their own adventure. And it would be lovely to maybe see Ellie and Inspector Quick have an episode to themselves at some point, maybe in the Doctor Who universe, maybe where Trevor and or maybe with Lightfoot and sort of Jago going maybe on holiday or something like that, maybe in taking place between series 9 when they go on that cruise, and maybe the Doctor could come back to Victorian London and sort of have a little bit of an adventure with both of those. That would be such brilliant characters, honestly. Higston and Quick, it's a sort of a relationship that we've got used to so much throughout this series, and a really strong bond at the same time. And also briefly going over Leela, played by Louise Jimson, and Colin Baker as well as the Doctor. Naturally, they play exactly the same characters that they've played for years and have some lovely moments. They don't have a pivotal moment in the script. They are essentially there for the ending scene where Lightfoot and Jago go to Buckingham Palace, which I will get onto in a little bit. And we also have Rowena Cooper as well, reprising her role as Queen Victoria, which was a little bit more of a warmer character that we got used to seeing in, I do believe, the Torchwood story Victorian Age. She was a little bit more strict in that episode and sort of a little bit more of a character that you don't necessarily like, but in this story she was a lot more warmer. And then of course seeing David Warner in there as well. He is a character and an actor that I really do like. I think I've met him on an occasion before, and he accidentally told me about this release, and he said about it before it was even announced, so I did sort of keep it under wraps that this episode was happening. But actually hearing this story from his perspective and the way that they've had these experiences so with recording Jago and Lightfoot, it was really interesting to actually meet him in person. Yeah, it was a really nice contribution to have him in the story. As you can tell, this story is mainly based around the characters. However, the narrative at the same time is a really nice and simplistic plot. I think that I'm going to go into the context of this series a little bit more, because if you are a Jago and Lightfoot fan, you may be wondering where this is taking place after the series that we've had previously. So you probably know that the past series that we had was series 13, and that series left on a cliffhanger where Jago and Lightfoot came back to London after having the Towns of Weng Chiang inspired series, and they had basically zeppelins in the sky. It was quite obvious that something has invaded London. So this series takes place, or this episode even takes place, after the unproduced season 14, because it is mentioned in the recent issue of DWM that they've basically scripted the entirety of series 14, and it was pretty much just about to go into recording when they heard the news that Trevor Baxter had passed away. So adventure there, who knows, we may see it in some other form at some point, maybe a novelised version, maybe ones that are told by the different members of the cast or something like that in a companion chronicle style format, who knows. But this episode basically takes place after season 14, so this is sort of a season 15.5 kind of thing where you have them returning. We have a few references to that series and the alien invasion that occurred in season 14 that was unproduced. And yeah, I like the way that Big Finish have done that, because I think that it's very nice to have that closure in there, so we don't have any of those loose ends that haven't in fact been tied up. It does feel like a piece that is a full stop, but also at the same time sort of a comma, and to say these episodes continue just off camera, much like how we had with Sarah Jane Adventures. It is very much the same technique. And yeah, I'm not going to say that Jago doesn't die, Lightfoot doesn't die, Ellie Higston doesn't die, David Warner doesn't die, Inspector Quick doesn't die, and nobody dies in this story. It is a celebratory piece, and the only thing that is emotional about this story is essentially the actual context behind it and being the last one. So I'm really happy to see that they've not killed off Jago and Lightfoot, which I expected anyway. I didn't expect them to do that. I will be complaining if so, because honestly that would have absolutely ripped me apart if they did. But yeah, I think that this story, as I say, it's a wonderful celebration of the characters and a narrative at the same time of having this idea of a Christmas/New Year story where you have Jago celebrating New Year by himself. We have Ellie and Inspector Quick singing Auld Lang Syne at the beginning, which is a really nice way to open the story. But then we have them going on this adventure, try and find out what's happened to Lightfoot and where he's gone. Is it espionage? Is he now a spy? Has he been kidnapped or something like that? And we find out that it's all relating to this snow globe that has basically reconstructed a perfect scenario for Jago based on the characters that he knows in real life. And it is a rather mind-bending story story because you feel like certain aspects of the episode are being taken away from his memory, and yet Jago has quite a big struggle throughout this story, and that moment at the very end where we have him getting this hot air balloon, and as I said that I previously mentioned, him going up into the sky and saying, "I'm coming to get you, Lightfoot," and then we have them reuniting at the very end in Lightfoot's house, and we have them going to Buckingham Palace to get a knighthood, or the equivalent of a knighthood, which is something that I've said, I do believe, maybe off camera in other places, but I've just wanted Jago Litefoot to have a knighthood or recognition by the Queen or something, because they've done so much for Victorian England, and it's sort of wrong to not get some credit from Queen Victoria herself. So finally in this story we get them having a knighthood, and we have them all having this party at the very end where people past, present and future come to see them and celebrate, and the series ends on them having a scene where they're all sat around a table having a drink, and they have a toast saying Jago Litefoot forever, and sort of the adventures will continue. And honestly, even as I'm saying this right now, I'm getting a little bit of a shiver down my spine, because it's just, they have the last moment of this episode is them chanting together the title of this story, and you just feel like, yeah, these adventures continue. Both of them are so happy, and they go on to have some wonderful scenes off camera, I guess. And yeah, I think that these adventures never really end for Doctor Who, which I do quite love. I think that they can never fully give closure, and I think that is the wonderful thing about Jago and Litefoot. And then at the very end of this episode, in case I wasn't broken enough, we did have a theme tune composition. In fact, I'm going to get the credits up for who did this, because the sound design for this story was absolutely incredible, honestly. I do believe we had a few people returning. We had the music by Howard Carter, Stephen Fox, and the theme by Jamie Robertson. The theme was amazing. It's one of which that you can actually hear in the trailer. There's been released a visual trailer, and yeah, we had a slow composition of the theme, and then we had this big sort of bombastic orchestral piece of the theme as well. The very iconic Jago and Litefoot theme that, as you all probably know, I literally have as my ringtone. I absolutely adore it. So yeah, that moment at the very end where we have an extended version of that, it ripped me apart, honestly. I think that it's just a lovely way to end off the series, but a lovely way to not end it off as well, because that's just, it's not an ending, but it is an ending. For us it's an ending, but for the characters it's not, and that is how I wanted this series to finish off. We also have the behind the scenes for this release, which is around 45 minutes worth of interview, which I never really mentioned. I think that with every single story we always get the behind the scenes, but this behind the scenes segment is very special because it is essentially all the cast sort of from the behind the scenes, being the producers, the directors, the writing team, as well as the actual cast from the series itself, actually reminiscing about their time on Jago and Litefoot, and once again really impacting that family feel for this series, and sort of saying about Trevor and the characters that they played. And we even have Christopher Benjamin in there as well, saying about Trevor and his time with him. And yeah, I don't think I've ever actually heard Christopher going into his time with Trevor actually to this extent, and the way that this has actually impacted him kind of with his passing, and it's just so nice to have a little bit about him at the very end there. And yeah, once again, that brought a tear to my eye as well, so I'm really happy to see that they actually put that piece on there. It is a very important part of the story. And yeah, I think that this episode, it doesn't exactly say I highly recommend this one. It feels wrong saying that, because I think that if you're a Jago Litefoot fan, you wouldn't need a review to say go out and buy this, because, you know, you should have it in your collection already. It is your full stop piece. But that said, at the same time, if you're somebody that hasn't got into Jago Litefoot yet, one, I highly recommend it. I'm starting some Big Finish reviews soon, going all the way back to the Tongs of Wang Chiang, then to the Mahogany Murders, and then to Jago Litefoot series 1, 2, 3, and so on, because I've nearly got the whole series, and kind of trying to get you to be involved in Jago Litefoot and actually watch and listen to this series, because it is, when I say that I absolutely adore it, I genuinely do, and I want as many of you as possible to actually go and listen to this series, because there's a reason it's gone on for 13 series, and it's because it's pretty bloody good. It says in the behind the scenes that by the end, this is one of the only series on Big Finish that has pretty much got the open commission, and it was allowed to be done for as long as Trevor, Baxter and Christopher Benjamin were around, and that was essentially, that was the deal. As long as we're alive, we're going to do it, and I think that that shows the passion behind the two characters of the series, and it does unfortunately show that that was in fact the case. That was for Litefoot especially, and for Trevor, that he did essentially do it up to his passing, and yet that is just such a wonderful part of the series, and there was a true heart behind it. But at the same time, I just want as many of you as possible to actually go and listen to Jago and Litefoot. Buy Series 1. It's a lot cheaper than all of the others. I think there is, in fact, at the time of filming, currently on sale, but I think that by the time this video goes out, it probably won't be. But yeah, I think that generally, if you are looking for a place to get into Jago and Litefoot, then I highly recommend taking a look at my Jago and Litefoot reviews that will be starting in the near future, where I go back to the very beginning and yeah, basically go through the whole adventure, which is the wonderful thing, as I say. Even though the adventures have ended, they haven't as well, because you can go back to the very beginning and enjoy them all again. Ending off this review, I would just like to say a massive thank you to the Big Finish team for producing this episode. It is an absolutely wonderful tribute, but also generally a massive thank you to Big Finish for actually producing this series for 13 whole series. I do believe that they said in the behind the scenes that there was around 60 recording days. A load of effort and a load of love has been put into this series, both from the behind the scenes writing and producing team, but also the characters as well. I'm so thankful that this audio drama format has managed to actually delve into these characters and really pad them out and give them the attention and the series that they deserve. So yeah, a big massive thank you to Big Finish for doing this, and a big massive thank you to Christopher Benjamin and Trevor Baxter as well, so for many happy memories when it comes to the Jago and Litefoot adventures, and also the amount of smiles and laughter they've put on my face at the same time, because I must admit there's been some times where I felt a little bit down and I thought, you know what, I'm going to listen to Jago and Litefoot because it's something that cheers me up, and they managed to do that effortlessly. And it's the same for this story as well. You get the same spread between tears and laughter at the same time, and if that doesn't sum up Jago and Litefoot, then I don't know what does. So yeah, thank you very much for watching this review. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's not been too sad, but also a little bit of a celebration review at the same time. And I guess that's it. That's Jago and Litefoot. After 13 series, several specials, 2 gentlemen, and many different adventures, I guess the infernal investigations are finally over for us, but hey, they continue to go on forever. Thanks for watching. I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.